The Rockport Incident, posted by Getty Asia. What's up guys, Sam here. If you're hearing this, I want to thank you for tuning in to my channel. As you all know, I narrate stories you guys submit. I just want to take a second to say, I love you guys, you're all awesome, talented people, and as a cliche as it may be to say, without you there is no me. Moving on, I recently decided to start out filming haunted locations and posting them as prompts for you guys to write about. The best story would be featured and the runners-up would go into a compilation story for later. After doing some research, I came up with the perfect place. For the last 64 years, the town of Rockport has been erased from history, and for good reason. Settlers first came to the area in 1860. Originally the town was named Crandall. Local legends say a group of strangers came to town one day, claiming the land belonged to them. Things quickly got violent. Somewhere along the line, all the town's children vanished. Believing the strangers were responsible, the townsfolk set out to track them down. There are no specifics on what actually occurred after that, but none of the townsfolk were ever seen again. Years later, the town was resettled and renamed Enoch City. Very little's known about the second set of inhabitants. No actual records from this time period exist. The only real information comes from the records of travellers who were never seen again after entering the region. The town itself grew over the years and was eventually renamed again after the Black Hawk War, now known as Rockfort. The town struggled to maintain its population, and by the 1940s, Rockfort had become Rockport, home to a meagre 27 residents. Eventually, developers took an interest in the area and began sending surveyors. None returned. Law enforcement was then sent in. Out of the 4 officers sent in to investigate, only 1 returned. Officer Robert Burke was found wandering the road leading into Rockport. He was severely injured and covered in blood. He passed 3 days later in a Utah hospital. Before his death, he was able to give a partial account of what took place that day. According to what little I could find, Burke claimed to have spent several days in Rockport. In reality, he and the other officers were in town a little under 2 hours before someone was sent in to check on them. He went on to state that the people there weren't human. They could change into things and look like anyone. The rest of his statement was described as horrified screaming, followed by a violent seizure. He was pronounced dead the next morning. After the Burke incident, more police were sent in and never returned. The town was unofficially off limits. No one was allowed in or out. Then in 1950, the entire valley was purposely flooded, killing all the residents of Rockport. The history itself was enough to get me excited about the whole thing. But when the town was recently uncovered due to a drought in the area, I knew this was fate. I spent the next few days planning every step. Originally I wanted to do it alone. I thought it would add an eerie vibe for the artists to work with. The problem was, when I broke the whole thing down, it was going to take way too long with just one person. This is where things get a little complicated. I don't have a lot of close personal friends I can drag into stuff like this, so I had to reach out to the one person I knew for sure would jump right in, Gary. Don't get me wrong, he's not a bad dude. As a matter of fact, we're pretty cool. The issue is, he's got his own channel that's co-hosted by his wife, Crystal. And I fucking hate might be a little strong. I don't hate her, I just don't want to be around her. She for sure wouldn't let a chance like this pass without getting their channel involved, which means she's going to try to take over the project. I'm not going to waste time with the play-by-play of the whole situation. In the end, it came down to me agreeing to her branching off filming segments for their show while Gary helped me out. 3 days later, at exactly 3 AM, we were standing on the road leading into Rockport. It was a lot bigger than I thought it would be. Some sections were mud-covered rubble, but most of the town was still standing. It was incredible. I couldn't wait to get started. Crystal and their cameraman went their way, while Gary and I split up to cover more ground. We had 2 hours to get as much footage as possible and get out before the parks and recreations people caught us. I started off slow, taking it all in, being sure to record every step of the way. The moment Gary and the others were out of sight, things got weird. At first it was little glitches with my camera and mic, nothing abnormal, just typical issues you'd have in a place like that. The further I went, I started noticing dry patches of dirt. It wasn't much, but it seemed odd considering everything was covered in mud. I'd made it to a set of buildings that looked like they could have been a storefront. Across the street were 2 buildings separated by a narrow alley. I slowly turned the camera to get a good shot of everything, and as I passed those buildings, could have sworn I saw someone standing in that alley. My instant reaction was to turn back to that spot, but there was no one there. Sort of laughing to myself, I decided to go inside the building closest to me. The moment I turned and stepped through that doorway, I felt sick to my stomach. My heart started racing and my knees buckled as the world around me swirled, causing me to stumble and nearly drop the camera. Catching my balance, I stood up straight and tried to shake it off. The instant I took a breath, the room exploded with light, so bright I had to close my eyes. The air around me was suddenly warm and dry. I could hear people talking and smell coffee mixed with cigarette smoke. As the light faded, allowing me to see, I found myself standing in an old-style cafe with the woman behind the counter staring at me over the rim of her glasses. "Look, honey, I can't have you standing there taking up space. Either buy something or hit the bricks," she blurted out while pointing to the exit. I was speechless. I couldn't wrap my mind around what was happening, and before I could utter a word, bells above the door behind me chimed as someone came in. "Sam? Damn it, boy. I've been looking everywhere for you. What are you doing here pestering Miss Tessa?" That voice instantly brought tears to my eyes. It was my mother. It wasn't possible. She'd been dead for years, but somehow there she was. My heart jumped up into my throat as I staggered back, bumping into the counter. All I could do was stand there with my mouth hanging open while tears rolled down my cheeks. Tilting her head to the side, her face softened as she uttered, "Are you alright?" Then reached out to touch me. I couldn't move. When her fingertips hit my shoulder, a chill shot through my body, and the world around me shifted back into reality. The sudden darkness of the room was too fast for my eyes to adjust. I couldn't see. As the moonlight slowly trickled in, I got myself together, but I couldn't shake the image of my mother out of my head. For the first few seconds, I would see her every time I blinked. As the image faded, I calmed down a little, but I was shook. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I needed to get out. Clicking the light for my camera on, I turned to leave and paused when I saw headlights outside the shop. My first thought was the parks and recreation people had caught us and we were about to get kicked out. Then I heard Crystal screaming and Gary yelling, "Get your hands off her!" Rushing outside, I see 3 men standing near a truck holding Crystal, Gary and their cameraman, Paul, at gunpoint. One of them spotted me right away and came over waving a pistol around. "Don't you move. Keep your hands where I can see them." Once he had a clean shot at me, he stopped. "Now, nice and slow, drop the camera." When I'd done as ordered, he had me lift my shirt, then slowly turn around to be sure I didn't have a weapon. Once he was certain I was unarmed, he walked me over to the others. 2 of them kept their guns on us, while the third robbed us for everything we had. The entire time, all I could think about was my mother's face. I didn't even flinch when one of them pistol whipped Paul for mouthing off. I didn't snap out of it until they zip-tied our hands and ordered us to go into one of the buildings. My chest instantly felt tight. I broke out in a cold sweat and panicked, yelling, "No, fuck no, I'm not going in there." My little outburst got me cracked in the back of the head, so hard I blacked out. When I woke up, I'd been hogtied and gagged. From where I was laying, I could see Crystal squirming, trying to free herself. Looking around, I didn't see the others, but I couldn't worry about them. I needed to focus on getting loose. After rolling in the mud for a while, I wound up on my back. That turned out to be the best thing that could have happened. The mud made my hands and wrists slick enough to slip out of the zip ties. The second I sat up and reached for the gag, I was blinded by that light again. When I was finally able to open my eyes, I found myself standing in an alleyway facing a storefront, while someone standing in front of it was getting it on camera. I didn't realise who I was looking at till the light he was using scanned past the alleyway, then stopped and came back. I was looking at myself before I went into that first building. I couldn't process what I was seeing. In absolute shock, I watched the other version of myself step through the doorway. The instant his light went off, I was back in the mud. The muffled sound of Crystal's voice slowly came into focus. I couldn't understand what she was saying, but I'm pretty sure it was something along the lines of, "Snap out of it and untie me, you shithead." Anyway, once she was free, the first thing she did was blame me. She actually believed I'd set the whole thing up. I didn't bother responding to anything she was saying. Trying to stay calm, I walked away. As I made it to the doorway, she let out a gasp and went silent. Can't say I wasn't happy about it, but when I looked back, she was gone. Stepping back, easing my way to the door, I managed to mutter, "What the fuck?" Just before I tripped over something and tumbled backwards, landing flat on my ass. In the moment between tripping and hitting the ground, the world around me warped out of focus. When I hit the ground, the mud I was covered in exploded into a dust cloud that slowly drifted down around me. As the dust powdered the ground, it sent out a shockwave that rippled across the surface of everything in sight, turning night into day as it passed. Nothing about the buildings changed, but the streets were clean and dry. I couldn't focus. The sudden shift of reality threw my mind into overdrive. I panicked. Getting up off the ground, I didn't bother looking around. I sprinted straight for the road leading away from the town. I didn't make it. Halfway there, I ran into Paul. He was bleeding from a gash in his head, and his shirt was torn. When he saw me, he rushed over and stopped. "We have to find the others." He wheezed, trying to catch his breath. "There's someone here." His words trailed off as he went wide-eyed and stepped back, looking past me. Turning to see what he was looking at, I froze. There was a woman carrying a baby running towards us. She kept glancing back over her shoulder as she hustled by, disappearing around the corner onto the next street. I looked at Paul and he looked at the road out, then back at me. Without saying a word, we both made a break for it. Of course, the cars were gone. The guys who'd robbed us took our keys. But at that point, I really didn't give a shit. I was going to walk out of there if I had to. Anything was better than spending another second in that place. After walking for a few seconds, I realised Paul wasn't with me. He was standing at the edge of the road, staring at me. Still walking away, I yelled back, "What are you doing? Come on, man, we gotta go." He didn't respond. I wasn't about to stop walking. If he wanted to stay, that was on him. I was getting the hell out of there. I called out to him one last time before picking up my pace and jogging away. I kept going till I needed a break, then stopped to catch my breath. Paul was just a dark spot in the distance now, but I could have sworn I could see him waving at me. Shrugging it off, I glanced up at the sky. It was day, but there was no sun, just a dull light that seemed to halfway mute the colours of everything around me. Ignoring it, I gathered myself and got moving. I'd been jogging for maybe a minute or two before I saw someone on the opposite side of the road running towards me. It was me. My heart dropped when I locked eyes with myself. We both stopped, looking one another over, while simultaneously saying, No, this isn't real. You're not real. Stop that." We barked at one another before shutting up. Narrowing my eyes, focusing on my double, I stepped to my left, and without missing a beat, he stepped to his right. We mirrored each other's every move right up until I reached out to touch him. The moment my hand landed on his shoulder, he smirked, then punched me in the nose. Before I could react, he shoved me down and ran away screaming. Between the busted nose, the throbbing headache, and the absolute insanity of the situation, I had a moment. I laughed, I cried, I yelled at the sky, and when it was all over, I sat there in the middle of the road, feeling like I'd lost my mind. It took a while for me to pull it together. When I finally got up and started walking, the first thing I thought of was the Burke incident. He'd claimed he'd been in Rockport for days, and it had only been hours. Something about that stuck in my mind. It was all I could think about till I saw the town coming into view, with Paul still standing by the road waving at me. My immediate reaction was to turn around and run the other way, but the moment I tried, I was blinded in mid-stride by that mind-numbing white light. Unable to keep my balance, I stumbled and fell, landing in a cold, wet mud. The smell of it flooded in with the familiar sound of Crystal's voice. My vision cleared. I was laying face down while she stood there talking to me. "What the hell's wrong with you? Get up and help me find Gary. We have to get out of here," she grumbled, stepping over me, heading for the door. Still groggy, I got up off the ground and wiped the mud from my face. as she stopped to look at me. "Come on, let's go," she hissed, motioning for me to follow her. I stood there for a second, confused by her tone. A minute ago she was accusing me of setting up the robbery. Now here she was asking for my help. A part of me wanted to tell her to fuck off, but I wasn't completely sure any of that was real. I started to question everything. I couldn't be certain that anything that was happening was real. I had to be sure. I needed to know this wasn't just in my mind. I stepped over to where Crystal was standing and leaned in like I was trying to kiss her. She responded by throat punching me and stepping back with an angry expression on her face. "Are you out of your mind?" She stormed off, leaving me standing there. It felt real enough. Hurrying to catch up, I rushed out into the street and stopped when I saw Gary and Paul running towards us. That's when I saw who they were running from. A little girl in a white dress playfully skipped behind them, giggling like this was all a game. Her laughter filled the air. It got so loud I had to cover my ears and run. It should have been a straight path back to the road, but the town seemed to be growing around us. We were running through brand new streets lined with buildings and alleyways that weren't there before. It was disorientating. None of us knew which way to go, so we were running blind, constantly looking over our shoulders. As we passed through an intersection, I saw Crystal stumble a little and bump into Paul, which caused him to fall. But we couldn't stop. I glanced back in time to see the girl get to him. Without breaking stride, she stepped on his lower back. The wet crack of his spine snapping was nauseating. But that wasn't the worst part. The pressure of her stepping on him forced his guts out through his mouth. He looked like one of those frogs you find stuck to the street. It was fucked up and horrible, but she stopped chasing us after that. As a matter of fact, she gave up as soon as he went down. It didn't matter. We ran till we couldn't run anymore, then hid in an alleyway. I was exhausted. Gary was flipping out and Crystal was pacing back and forward, trying to make sense of it all. Turn his attention to me. Gary snapped, "What is this shit? Jesus Christ. Did you see what happened? His eyes popped out. His fucking eyes. I think I'm going to be sick." He retched and covered his mouth, fighting the urge to vomit before shaking his head and getting quiet. I was speechless. All I could do was lean against the wall, sucking wind till I saw something moving near the end of the alley. "Hey guys, I think we should go." As the words left my mouth, a short dark figure stepped into the opening. It wasn't the girl. This one was slightly taller, and by the looks of it, a boy. Crystal stopped pacing and turned to see what I was talking about. "What do you want from us?" she screamed, taking a step in the kid's direction. Before Gary could rush over to stop her, the boy didn't respond. Instead, he brought a finger up to his lips and shushed her as more children joined him, blocking the opening. The other end of the alley was still open. I yelled to the two of them, "Come on, we gotta go." But they didn't seem to hear me. That's when I realised I couldn't hear them either. I could see their mouths moving, but there was no sound. Waving my hands, getting their attention, I pointed to the opposite end of the alley and ran. They followed. As we rushed out onto the next street, I could hear again from behind me. Gary yelled, "Left! Make a left!" Making the turn, I could see the end of the street and a way out. There was an opening between two buildings that would lead us to the hill that borders the town. If we could make it to the top, we would have to cut through the woods to get back to the highway, but it was worth the risk. Ahead of us, I could see more children gathering along the street. They were watching us. Some threw stones from the rooftops, while others ran alongside us, laughing. Trying not to focus on them, I pushed harder. This was it. We were getting out. The opening was just a few feet away when one of the rocks they were throwing hit me in the head, knocking me off balance. I didn't fall, but I was thrown off course and slammed into the corner of the building as Crystal raced by me. Gary grabbed the back of my shirt as he passed and pulled me into the opening, allowing me to get it together and keep going. We were halfway to the top when something grabbed Gary by the leg. He screamed, "Fuck!" as he face planted into the side of the hill, sending rocks and debris tumbling in my direction. I couldn't avoid it in time and got tripped up, but I managed to keep my balance long enough to see what grabbed him. At first glance, I thought it was some kind of creature. As I got closer, I saw it clearly. Roots were wrapping themselves around his legs. By the time I made it to him, they were pulling him into the ground. Hearing him yelp, Crystal turned back and managed to get hold of his arms. She was trying to pull him free. When I got close enough to help, the root was almost to his waist. It moved like a snake coiling around its prey. The second I reached out to touch it, the smaller extensions that were growing from its back lashed out, wrapping themselves around my arms. As thin as they were, it took real effort to pull myself free. They tore into my skin, leaving razor-like cuts along my forearms. The pain was unreal. It sent a chill through my bones, followed by a warm sensation that made my eyes water and my tongue go numb. I thought I'd black out, but Crystal's voice snapped me out of it. "Get over here and help me, goddammit. I'm losing my grip." Before I could get in place, Gary's bones started snapping. I literally saw and heard his pelvis collapse before he went limp. I couldn't tell if he was dead or passed out, but I knew we couldn't help him. I had to pull Crystal away as the roots dragged Gary's body into the ground. She screamed and fought against me till we both realised the children were standing at the bottom of the hill watching us. There had to be at least a dozen of them. They all stood perfectly still, smiling at us, till we reached the top of the hill. Then they all scattered. I don't think either of us said a word till we got to the woods. Once we were standing there, staring into the darkness ahead, I said the first thing to pop into my head: "This is a really bad idea." Crystal didn't respond. She just nodded her head and started walking. I had to stop her before she went too far. "I think we should mark a path in case we have to turn back." She gave me an agitated look, then huffed. "I don't give a shit what you do. I'm going to keep walking till I get to the highway. Then I never want to see your stupid fucking face again." When I didn't snap back at her, she turned and walked away. Instead of rushing to catch up to her, I snapped a low-hanging branch and left it pointing to the ground. Keeping my eyes on her, I stayed back and marked every 10th tree till we came to a clearing with an old hunting cabin sitting in the centre of it. The place looked like it was barely standing, but there were fresh deer hides hanging near a pile of firewood. Someone was living there. Now, I've seen a million horror movies and in every situation like this, it's never a good idea to go in the creepy cabin. When I told Crystal we should keep moving, she agreed. As we started to walk off, the front door creaked open and a woman stepped out. I didn't recognise her till I heard the sound of a baby crying coming from inside. It was the woman who'd ran past Paul and I in the street. She looked around for a moment, then waved us over and called out, "You have to get inside, they'll be here soon." As I turned to look at Crystal, something heavy landed at my feet. It was Gary's head. I don't know why, but my first reaction was to kick the damn thing away from me, which turned out to be a mistake. Heads are heavy. The punt sent it tumbling across the ground, coming to a stop in front of Crystal. She didn't even look at it. Her instant reaction was to kick it directly back to me, only now it was slightly airborne. The fucking thing smacked against my kneecap and nearly made my leg buckle. If I hadn't been in the process of trying to dodge it, that probably could have done some real damage. Wincing a little and regaining my balance, I noticed Crystal was smirking at me, with a blank look in her eyes. Something about that look reminded me of Paul standing on the side of the road. "Hurry, you need to get inside." The strange woman's voice took my attention away from Crystal. At that moment I could have sworn she sounded exactly like my mother, but as I focused on her, it changed. Hesitantly taking a step towards the cabin, I glanced back at Crystal in time to see one of those children running up behind her. I yelled, "Look out!" It was too late. The kid jumped on her back, causing her to scream and panic while trying to throw him off. I wish I could say I sprung into action, but the shock of the situation left me stumped, just long enough for another one to come scrambling out of the darkness. Snapping out of it, I rushed towards her. The boy on her back howled like a wild animal and dug his fingers into her face, trying to hang on as I grabbed him. Pulling him away took more effort than I expected, but I managed to toss him aside as the second one bit into my leg. "Fuck!" I screamed out of reflex, brought my fist down on top of her head. The solid thunk of my fist bouncing off her skull made the little wench release me. Without another word, I grabbed Crystal by the arm and ran straight for the cabin door, which was now closing as the old lady attempted to get back inside. "Wait!" Crystal screamed as we reached the porch. I guess the old lady felt sorry for us and held it open just long enough for us to tumble inside. The door slammed shut with a resounding bang that thundered through my brain, and the room around me shifted. Reality flickered and lagged, causing a rippling effect to cascade across the room. I tried to speak, but my words came out slow and distorted. "We need to get out," was all I managed to say before Crystal started screaming. Turning to face her made every muscle in my body burn. She was suspended, spread eagle in midair. The strange woman seemed to be moving with the shifts in reality, appearing in different locations around the room, finally coming to a stop in front of Crystal. "We've waited so long. New blood for the land has been delivered." The woman's words echoed and bounced around the room, multiplying, crashing into one another, becoming whispers, then roars, and finally silence. There was a long still moment. I don't know if there was actually nothing there, or if my mind just can't handle whatever it was. All I can recall is stillness. No up or down, no dark or light, just an overwhelming sense of time dripping away. Then without warning, I found myself staring into the strange woman's eyes. She had materialised directly in front of me. A wicked smile stretched across her face, revealing rows of shark-like teeth. as her skin withered and cracked and then started falling away. The face beneath her face was something out of a nightmare. She seemed to be made up of thousands of tiny people, all of them writhing in agony, causing her skin to take on that rippling I'd seen around me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear myself from her and gouge my eyes out to free myself of the horrific thing, but I couldn't. Her voice flooded my mind. "Bring us more." The words sent a chill up my spine, causing my stomach to turn. Before she spoke again, "Blood for the land." I don't know if I blinked or if her movements were that imperceivable, but in an instant she was standing in front of Crystal. Her agony had somehow become white noise playing out in the background, only to come screaming back in absolute clarity. That thing, that horrible fucking thing, opened its mouth impossibly wide, releasing a tongue made of human arms. I couldn't understand what I was seeing, but I couldn't look away. Each appendage tore a fistful of Crystal's flesh, before collapsing in on itself till there was nothing left, just a small pulsing sack suspended in midair. The room went silent for what felt like a long time, then a heartbeat. At first it was faint, barely noticeable. As it got louder, reality warped with each pump. The creature moved in an almost human fashion, stepping over the pulsing sack, absorbing it into itself. The body quivered and shifted, slowly morphing to a now fully pregnant woman. She turned and smiled at me while rubbing the bulge in her stomach, then whispered, "Bring us more." My vision flooded with white light and my body went numb as the words echoed through my brain. I felt myself falling in that brief moment before landing flat on my ass. Reality came crashing in. I was in the first storefront I'd gone into. I didn't hesitate to jump up, grab the camera and get out of there. I ran all the way back to the road we'd parked on. My car was there, but there was no sign of the others. I took a second to catch my breath and get my keys. As I did, flashing lights from a ranger's truck came speeding my way. I spent the weekend in jail for trespassing, but when I finally got home, I checked the footage. In total there was 45 minutes of film. Gary, Crystal and Paul aren't in it. The footage consists of me arriving in Rockport alone, then walking into the storefront and filming a wall till I fell, then got up and ran to the road. I tried reaching out to the others multiple times, hoping maybe none of it happened, but it's been months and no one has seen or heard from any of them. At this point I have no intention of ever going back to that town. I'm only doing this now because, well, a few days ago I received an invitation in the mail. It was to a birthday party in Rockport. If anything should happen to me, I want this to serve as my public notice. I'll do my best to update this if I can, but for now, this is Sam, signing off. The Skinwalker. My father told me a story once. I'll never forget it, for a few reasons. I think it's the first story he ever told me as a child. It's also the story of how my grandfather died, but honestly, that isn't the reason. You hear stories on TV, or sometimes you overhear something in public places, People talk about ghosts and aliens, and you think to yourself, that isn't real. They're making it up as they're mistaken, or they're crazy, or something like that. You just can't believe it until something happens, something that brings it all together, connects the dots in a way you didn't think of before. Maybe it happens to you. Maybe you hear the same story again and again, happening to different people. It doesn't take long for the whole world to become a lot bigger than you thought it was. As I said, this is a story my father told me, but I never believed it, even though he swore up and down it was true. It wasn't until I started clicking around the internet I started to believe. I started to hear other stories just like the one my father told me. It didn't take me long to believe in the rake. That's not what my father called it, of course. He's never used the internet in his life. He wouldn't know what the conscientious has taken to naming it, when he chose to call it something other than it, or that thing. He called it Skinwalker, after an old Navajo tale his grandfather told him. But I'll tell you the story the way he told me. We were out hunting one night, he'd tell me. Coyotes. We'd kill 'em for $50 a skin. They lived on a dairy farm in Ohio. They'd kill calves sometimes. We'd do it every night because we needed the money. Sometimes while we were out, we'd come on a deer and kill it. Our landlord didn't mind, and it could feed our family for a few nights and save us some money. Anyway, we were done making our rounds and heading home, walking, because we didn't have a car or some four-wheeler back then. We'd cut through the woods. That's when we came up on it. Blood everywhere, splattered on the trees, in the grass, in the creek, everywhere. At first, we figured it was a pack of coyotes. We'd seen it sometimes, but they can't scavenge and start hunting deer or cattle. The worst was when they bred with feral dogs, but this wasn't like that. See, when a pack of dogs or wolves or coyotes attack something, they do it right. They'll pick off one that's weak or sick or old or just small. They'll hunt it, draw it into a corner, someplace it can't get out of, and they'll run it right to the biggest one, the alpha, and the deer will never see the alpha. It might hear it, but it won't see it. It'll just notice that its throat is gone, and then it'll drop dead. It's quick, it's clean. That wasn't what happened here. Something had run up on a den of deer. Coyotes won't attack a den. Wolves neither, because they'd get too much of a fight. There were three bodies, just torn apart. You'd see a head here, a leg here, a torso there. Predators don't do that. They don't leave behind scraps. What had done this hadn't done it for food. It had done it for fun. But we didn't know that. We saw a bunch of carcasses and we think it's something we gotta take care of. I remember my dad telling me to go home. He thought it was a pack of feral dogs. But I wasn't leaving him, and I damn sure wasn't walking through 2 miles of woods alone. with nothing but a 22 and a pocket knife. He was only 13 at the time, so a 22 rifle was about the only gun he could reliably use. Dad had the shotgun, and I wasn't going anywhere without it. It took me a while to convince him, but finally we began tracking whatever did that. It wasn't hard either, we just followed the blood. Either that thing bled a deer before it got away, or it dragged one for a mile. I don't know. I know that I'd never seen my dad scared before that night. We started hearing noises. I've been in a lot of woods in my life. I've been all over the world and ain't never heard noises like I heard that night. I heard things screaming. Heard deer and fox and rabbits, raccoons, birds. Just scared. Keep in mind, this is maybe 12 or 1 o'clock. Except the fox and some birds, nothing was supposed to be even awake. But they weren't just awake, they were moving. I saw flocks of birds that night fly straight into trees, just trying to get out of there. We came upon a pack of coyotes, nearly shot a couple, thinking it was what we were looking for. But then we saw they were running towards us. They ran right past us. They didn't even notice. Then some deer did the same. Then some rabbits, squirrels, foxes, and even a couple of wild hogs. These things were supposed to be eating each other, and the only thing they cared about was getting out of there. We should have put it together that maybe whatever we were tracking, it wasn't something we were supposed to see, and it wasn't something we could kill. I don't know why we didn't just go home. I guess we were curious. I think that was my dad's nature, to go toward trouble, to fight. And knowing what I knew about what my father did during the war, my nature was to stay close to him. We finally get into an open valley. It was normally a soy field, but it wasn't in season, so it was just flat dirt. We saw the tracks. Then a lot of the animals fleeing the forest had paved over the land. But where that deer blood was, nothing had taken a single step, like they were leaving it for us to find. The tracks were shallow. Whatever it was couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds. But that didn't mean much. A bobcat weighing 40 pounds wet nearly tore out my damn throat once. All that means is that it's quick and hard to hit. So we follow the tracks, and it doesn't take us long to find where it is. There's this old schoolhouse that sits on the top of a hill. Half of it had been ripped out by a tornado, but nobody lived there, not for a long time. We caught homeless people in there sometimes, or druggies looking for a safe place to shoot up. We figured maybe that was it. Maybe it was some sick kid riding high. But we didn't think that for long. We get within 50 yards and we hear this noise. A screeching kind of sound. It was sort of made up of two different sounds. One was a high-pitched screech. Another was a low-pitched growl. It was making both at the same time. We get within 20 yards and we hear this sound. I can remember thinking that it sounded like paper being torn apart, while someone was swinging water in a bucket back and forth. Dad looks at me, kneels down and whispers, "I gotta stay behind him, 'cause we're about to corner him. Any animal will fight when it's cornered, especially when it's a predator. But we can tell by the tracks that it's just a one." He tells me it's probably a single feral dog, probably rabid. The plan is to sneak up on it while it's eating, shoot it, and then keep shooting it till it don't move anymore. Then slit its throat. If it gets to Dad, it's my job to shoot it or stab it to get it off him. So he walks up and I'm right behind him, just a tad to his side, so I can see what it is. I wish to this day I hadn't. It was leaning over a carcass, tears off its flesh and throws what it doesn't nibble at its side. There's blood all over the brick, glistening in the moonlight. It's a pale white, human looking, but not quite human. It had arms and legs like a human, but it sat like a monkey, hunched over. Its hands weren't normal. It had long fingers with claws at the end. So we see that, and my dad hesitates. He wasn't about to open fire on a person, so he clears his throat to try to get it to turn around. I swear to God, all the noise just ceased. I ain't ever heard true silence before that, and not after it. But for 2 seconds, nothing. Nothing made any noise, which made it all the louder when it turned around, made this shrill cry and jumped on Dad. He got a shot off. I think he missed. If he hit the thing, it didn't mind, but it was on him. Tears parts of him off. I start shooting it with the 22, point blank, but it was barely bled the thing. I got off 5 rounds and then I started hitting it with the gun butt, but it wasn't budging. It didn't even register that I was there. It clawed at my dad, taking off bits of his flesh. It started on his torso, ripping off the skin, his tit. Then it moved up. It tore off his throat. It tore off his nose, his eyes. It scalped him. Then it started digging in and ripped off the bottom half of his jaw, the little bones and that tube in your neck, then his ribs. I don't exactly remember what's happened, but somehow my dad's knife ends up in this thing's shoulder and my dad ends up on my back. I'm running, and by God I'm running faster than I'd ever run before or after that, and it's following me. I end up back in the woods, opposite the ones we've been in. I'm heading towards my landlord's house, 'cause it's half a mile away. I can hear this thing screeching and moaning. I hear the trees' branches crack and get thrown around. It sounds like someone's taking an axe to every single tree I pass. It's cracking so loud and often, but I just ain't looking back. Finally, I trip into gravel. I look up and there's my landlord and a bunch of his buddies, drinking around a campfire. I scream and I cry, and they come over. I'm telling them to call an ambulance. He looks at me, and I'll never forget what he said. "What is that on your back?" he asked me. Just as he said it, he saw one of those god-awful flannel shirts my dad wore everywhere. It was what was left of my dad, most of his head, his torso, but nothing after the waist. Suddenly we hear it screeching. He grabs me. My dad gets thrown on the ground. I'm fighting him, crying, 'cause I think we can still save him. Somehow, my dad had been gone before I ever picked him up. He has to pick me up and throw me inside before I come with him. He and his buddies were all inside, and they're locking doors and getting guns. The landlord's asking me what's happened, but I just don't know what to tell him. He pieced enough of it all together to understand that there was something dangerous there. All the lights in the house are on, and someone calls the cops. They'll be there, but in 15 minutes. We look outside and see it walk in front of the fire they made. Don't know what it is. One of them says, "It looks like an ape." Suddenly, something goes through the window. We shoot at it, but ain't the thing. It's my landlord's dog. Just the body though, not his head or legs. We start pushing things in front of doors and windows when we hear something in the garage. I remember one of his friends saying that the doors were open. We hear metal and glass just get ripped apart. We put a couch and a TV in front of the door to the garage. It banged around some more, but then it got quiet. Not silent like it was before. We could hear it move around some. And the guys were talking, making sure the guns were ready. Someone hands me a pistol. No sooner did I cock the hammer back did we hear something shatter upstairs. Then we heard it screech again, except now it was louder and didn't echo and fade out, because it was inside. We all rushed to the other door leading upstairs, and we got to it just as the thing did. It opened it just a bit, and 4 or 5 men just slammed into it. It got its hand through. Someone with a shotgun took care of that, put the barrel right up to its wrist and pulled the trigger, cut its hand clean off. That only pissed it off though. It started pushing on that door, clawing. We were on one side, pushing as best we could, and it was on the other, doing the same. That wood just wasn't going to hold, so someone tells us to keep our heads down. Suddenly the top half of the door is just gone. My ears are ringing, and there are splinters everywhere. 2 or 3 of them just unloaded on the top of that door. I don't really know where it went after that. The police got there. I was still glued to that door. What was left of it. The sun was up before they got me off it. They put me in a hospital for a while. A lot of people talked to me, but I didn't talk back. Not for a long time. When I got back home, I got a job from the landlord, working on the farm. We didn't talk much, not about the thing, but I signed up for the army when I was 19, and he sat me down to drink some scotch as a send-off. I asked him right away what the police told him. The story they went with was a wild animal, probably a wolf, or maybe a bear, that had migrated north. I asked him how they could say that when they had the hand. He looks at me, stunned. He tells me that the hand never made it back to the station. The cop who had it in his car wrecked, drove into a tree, died on impact. The hand was never found, probably taken away by an animal. The cops, when they would acknowledge the hand existed at all, said it was simply the paw of a bear that looked like a human hand. I never talked to the landlord again. He went missing when I was in basic. The cops never found him. They said he owed some people some money and just run away. But I don't think it's that simple. I never went back to those woods. I wouldn't even if I had gotten the whole goddamn US Army on my back. But that was a lie. When my mother died, I don't think my father felt he had anything left, and that he might as well settle old scores. He went to those woods. He never came back. The FBI was called. They did a show for everyone involved, but I knew they weren't really looking. I had to get one drunk and slip him a few 50s before he finally told me that they got a few calls about those woods every year, about someone up and vanishing. But that was all he wanted to tell me. Before he got up and left with the rest of his team, he wrote "The Rake" onto a napkin. I didn't know what it meant until I searched for it on the internet. Honestly, I would have rather not known. Skinwalkers. As legend goes, to become a skinwalker, you must attain priesthood and then kill a member of your own family. Then and only then can you gain the powers to shapeshift. Then and only then are you a true skinwalker. According to local folklore, a man had just done just that. An Indian priest had supposedly not only killed one, but 5 immediate members of his family. They never caught this man. He disappeared into the woods, never to be seen again. When Jason and Alex set out for their camping trip, they knew all the old legends, and they laughed at the idea that a skinwalker would come get them if they trespassed on the old Indian land, the same land that the supposed murders had taken place. And why should they believe the legends? A man becoming a beast was probably the most ridiculous thing imaginable. Jason and Alex were brothers. They spent their entire lives together until Jason had gotten married. Then Jason moved away and started a family, but not Alex. Alex stayed in their hometown, tending to their parents, making an honest living off the land, and tried to be a good person. And Alex had succeeded at this. He hadn't broken a commandment in years and was well on his way, in his own mind, to heaven. 3 years had passed between their last get-together, and 3 more might have passed if Alex didn't insist on a camping trip. But insist he did, and there they were. It was getting dark, and the 2 of them were laying out under the stars. They were deep in the woods, and they had no GPS or maps, but they knew the path back from where they were. They had gone there as kids. Never know, huh? Alex replied. He only caught bits and pieces sometimes. We can never let Dad know, Jason reiterated. Know what? That we stayed on the old Indian land past dark. We promised him as kids, and I wouldn't want to upset him now. He's getting pretty close to dead. And if we started an argument now, we may not resolve it in time for, just don't tell him or Ma, okay? Okay, no problem. They both were silent for a while, until up creeped a small raccoon. "Well, look at that," Alex called as he pointed towards the critter. It stared at them for several minutes, not moving, not attempting to flee. When they motioned towards it, it stayed almost perfectly still. And then, finally, it left. Minutes later came a deer. Again, the creature stayed and watched them. Unwavering determination glared in its eyes. For about 2 hours, the duo was kept awake as every animal they knew to live in the forest, and some they were almost sure didn't inhabit the area, came to gaze upon them. The final animal was a grey wolf. It slowly moved towards them, and when it was 5 feet away, it stopped. "Don't move. Don't panic. It'll go," Jason assured Alex. The wolf slowly stood up onto its hind legs, then its limbs began to contort and pop. Horror slid over Jason and Alex's face as they saw the fur tear open, revealing light brown flesh underneath. Finally, they gazed upon what looked like a man with a wolf head. The skull of the wolf split open like a melon, the fur sliding off it, the bone chipping and falling like a fragile eggshell, and in its place slowly grew out the head of a man. The man now stood before the paralyzed brothers. They couldn't seem to move. "This is my land," said the man, with an almost supernatural smile. Now, mister, I'm gonna have to ask you to get. Alex trailed off. "Get the fuck away from us," Jason said as fiercely as he could. The man began to laugh, and as he continued to laugh, the pitch changed. It grew deeper, from that of a man to that of a demon, and soon it sounded as if Satan himself was bellowing out at them. The man's skin grew black as coal, and his eyes yellow like a cat's. His demonic laughter echoed through the forest. As he drew closer and closer, the brothers being unarmed, they had no choice other than to flee, and that's what they did. They ran as fast as they could, except instead of out to their cars, they were cornered into running deeper into the woods. For hours, they seemed to play cat and mouse. Several times, animals they passed would burst open in a grotesque manner, revealing the deranged man, but they continued to run. Finally reaching a cabin, they ducked inside. They were filled with fear, and the brothers felt that leaving the cabin would end in their deaths. What they found in the cabin made them regret their ignorance on legends. For in the main bedroom of the cabin was corpses, at least 100 of them. Every animal they had seen that night was there, along with some larger bodies, some human bodies. It was then that the man burst into the room, except he was once more a wolf. In his deep voice he snickered out, "Welcome home." The following week, the authorities found the cabin during their search for Jason and Alex. Both brothers' faces looked as if they were eaten by an animal of some sort. 6 days later, a security camera several states over caught Alex filling up a car with gas. Several eyewitnesses also reported seeing the dead man, and on nearly all accounts, he was seen smiling a wide, toothy, unnatural grin. A hysteric letter posted by Bloody Spaghetti. Dear brother, I'm writing to you from the distant Alti Republic. Forgive me for not writing to you in a while, and I hope you aren't too worried about my safety and well-being. I'm doing great, and I have, in fact, much to tell you about my recent travels. As of writing this letter, I am staying in a remote village where time has halted, seemingly. I do not know for how long, but the residents of this small settlement, where only 4 clans live, have isolated themselves from the rest of the country and the world. Whenever I ask how long they've been living like this, they tell me that this has been their life, their entire lives, the young and the old alike. Some of these people are in their 80s, so I assume it's been this way since at least the start of the century, maybe prior. 3 of the families are Russian, and 1 is German, judging by their last names. They all speak an outdated dialect of the language, and even count their dates using the old calendar. There is no electricity, nor running water. They do everything the old-fashioned way. They wash in the stream nearby and fetch drinking waters from antique wells. These people gather and hunt their food. Crude underground basements exist to preserve supplies for the winter. All of their clothing and tools are handmade, and they are hospitable people, very joyous and simple in nature. They are deeply religious, even though they don't really have a church to speak of, just a tiny shack filled with icons and a makeshift altar. I think this is where my compliments for the people will end. The truth of the matter is, they are deeply afraid of modernity and have some very outdated and dangerous superstitions. I say this because it seems like they are all carrying tuberculosis. While they are lively and joyous for people who are on the brink of coughing themselves to death, they are all visibly gaunt and pale. Severe cases are hunched over and barely mobile. I'm pretty sure I've seen a few lying half dead on the ground. No one seems to bother to pick them up. Simply put, no one cares. It's natural for them. The stench of death is proverbially common here, and they embrace it with passion. They call the Cophonia, an old name for TB, the work of undead spirits, vampires, and other terrible devils who came back from the afterlife. I am equally fascinated and mortified by the lives of these people. Refusing to believe me, it is caused by a bacterium, and that is treatable with conventional medicine. Instead, they perpetuate the idea amongst themselves that a recently deceased relative, or perhaps one gone from this world for a while, came back to torment the living by draining the blood out of them. This is absurd medieval thought, and the madness doesn't stop with their theory. It spills over into actual practice. In fact, I've decided to write to you because they invited me to watch a ritual destruction of one such vampire, a young woman who had succumbed to the disease with about half of her family. Only an old man and a young boy remain of this clan now. Seems like it's bound to go extinct. Which isn't so bad, as I've heard this ritual has been done to a few of the old men's relatives already. Granted, it won't do any good to the already inbred population, but alas, at least he won't be able to watch the corpses of his loved ones be abused like that. Before I digress, 3 other men and I went to the nearby forest last night. That's where the family had been burying its dead for generations, apparently an unassuming patch of land with an old oak marked by a few barely noticeable cut marks. Unsurprisingly, the men knew where to dig. After all, they've done the same more than once. They dug for a few long minutes as I held a solar oil lamp over their heads, illuminating a tiny patch of night wilderness. At that moment, the air seemed tense and almost explosive. The men gasped in shock once they saw the first patch of living skin on the girl, immediately concluding she had been feeding on the living. It later turned out was buried a mere few weeks ago, so her condition was to be expected. The more they dug, the worse the smell of the corpse became. It also became clearer that she had indeed been what these people consider a vampire. Blood still coated her lips, which is again common of victims of TB. Her hair and nails seemed to have grown, which is explained by the skin receding and drying out. They have people lying on the ground next to their houses who look about the same and smell almost as bad, and they still think this is one is dead but comes back to life every other night, while the ones in the village are still alive. The 3 men pull the body out of the ground and position it face down. Then one of them pulled out a knife and started cutting into the funeral garments of the girl. My immediate thoughts had been worse than what he'd actually done. Can't blame me for thinking they might want to get back at the girl, if you catch my drift. Turned out that after tearing open her garments, he tore open her side, reaching with his bare hand into her shriveled little form, as if she hadn't had enough, and pulled out something. The sound of him tearing out something from within the corpse made me shudder visibly. The small reddish-brown organ he pulled out of the girl was her liver. He dropped it on the ground by my feet. I felt the urge to throw up at that moment. Next, he turned the corpse over and straddled it to the amusement of his co-conspirators, before tearing her garment once more and jamming the knife into the girl's chest. He then dragged it along the length of her chest, making the worst sounds. It only got worse when he pulled the skin and muscle tissue open, once again with his bare hands. In the meantime, another man was trying to break off a branch from the oak tree. When I asked him what for, he said it was to stake her. The man straddling the girl reached inside her chest, underneath her the rib cage, and started fondling the heart. He cursed angrily that there had been blood in the heart. Some words he used were unfamiliar to me. Can you imagine my shock when the first man decided it would be smart to decapitate the corpse with a shovel? He just hit it out of the blue with full force across the neck. The noise of that blow made me cringe physically. I turned my gaze to him as I watched him mindlessly slam the shovel again and again at the neck. Blood droplets flew all over the place, further coating the man straddling the corpse. At some point, the girl started leaking blood from her mouth, and the man on top of her recoiled in horror. The sight of an adult believing a corpse is about to pounce on him was funny, but I had to hold back my laughter, not wanting to risk ending up like the little girl. To me, it now seems like these people are capable of anything their madness would push them toward. The body seemed to convulse and shake with each blow, as remains of the blood and gases were leaking from the newly found orifice in her neck. The man with the shovel had given up about halfway through decapitating the girl. Her head hung to the side as gore poured beneath her, staining the soil. Thankfully, the man with the wooden branch was done praying over it, I suppose, and finally decided to put all 5 of us out of our misery. He held the branch high above his head as he walked towards the corpse. Once over, he jammed the branch as hard as he could into the heart of the girl. The body let out a short and loud gurgling sound before returning to its silent rest. The 3 men reburied the mutilated body in its original resting place. We headed back to the village. I didn't sleep the entire night after that. You will not believe me why. About halfway back to the village, our lamps went out of oil. Surrounded by almost complete darkness, we stopped for a moment, and at that moment, I heard some whistling behind me. Turning around, I saw a thin girl standing in the woods. She was pale, almost too pale. The moonlight had coloured her form in a silver tint. Her eyes were icy blue. Something about her was terribly wrong. I was going to say something to the others, but then she smiled. Jagged teeth, covered in blood, had adorned her mouth before she disappeared altogether. They noticed I wasn't moving and urged me to keep moving. I didn't tell them anything, but I couldn't keep that monstrous smile out of my mind. I don't know what I've seen, but I will not stay here longer than a couple more days. One man whom I went out with terribly fell ill during the night. He might have had the disease in remission, but I can't know for sure. He never mentioned being sick. In any case, he was bound to get it regardless after digging inside the body of a person who recently died from the same plague. From the looks of things, I don't think it'll be long before he joins the girl in the forest. I think they are about to go vampire hunting once again tonight. I won't join them this time. Seeing one corpse get due to an absurd hysteria was enough. With this, I conclude my letter. I hope you are doing fine and won't be too bothered by the details. Love you, brother. Stay in touch. Ice cream truck incident. Posted by dependent ad 87493. This happened around 3 weeks ago. Before I start with the story, I should give some information of myself. My name is Henry Lawrence. I'm 23 years old. Sexuality is gay. Alright, on with the story. So, I was driving home from work that day. Work was really stressful and tiring. So, as I was driving down some wooded area, I noticed something smoking. I slowed my vehicle down to see what it was. As I got within 5 meters from the smoking object, I could see it was a crashed ice cream truck. I was in shock. There was no one in these wooded areas. Who would make an ice cream truck crash? Or what? As I thought that, I heard screaming. I hurried out of my car and looked to where the screaming was coming from. I didn't see anything, so I went to investigate the truck. The tyre was the one smoking and almost on fire. Some of the windows were broken, and there was splattered ice cream all around the inside of the truck. I headed inside the truck and investigated it. There was pink, white and brown ice cream splattered all across the truck, but there was also dark red liquid splattered near the driver's seat. I put some on my finger and tasted it. It was blood. Just then, I heard more screaming. I rushed out of the truck and looked where the scream was heard. I could faintly see 2 shadows. One looking like he's being eaten to death, and one was eating the guy. I was scared and started to go to my car. Then, when the thing was done eating its prey, it looked at me. I hurried into my car, started it and floored it until the wooded area was not in my sight anymore. When I got home, I put my coat on the hanger, petted my cat and greeted my boyfriend Jackson. Oh, hey babe, welcome back. Hey babe, how was work? Fucking stressful. I had to do 5 long sheets of paperwork until I was done. Fucking boring and stressful. Have to agree. And why did you take longer than usual to get home? Well, I had to tell him. I sighed and told him everything, and he was shaking wide-eyed to tell me that this is a prank. Isn't it, babe? He started to cry and I came over there to comfort him. The next morning I headed to the living room and Jackson was there. Morning babe, how was your sleep? Good, how was yours? It was alright. I sat down next to him. He gave me a kiss on the cheek and I smiled and blushed. We were channel surfing for about 2 minutes until we came across this news report about a recent murder in a wooded area near a crashed ice cream truck. I realised where it was, and I knew Jackson did as well. After this experience, I've been avoiding wooded areas. Me and Jackson moved to a non-wooded area and I quit my old job and got a new one at McDonald's, and sometimes I have these nightmares about the creature tearing in my flesh, but it doesn't matter. I'm nowhere near that area, and as long as there's No more ice cream truck crashes. We'll be fine. I hope. The Girl and Her Dog. Posted by Sawsville. It's mid-May here in Arizona. For context, I am a 20-year-old male. I had just recently gotten home with my girlfriend, decently late after a movie, about 12:20 at night. We brought our items inside when I realised I left my phone in my truck that was parked on the road. I, of course, went out to grab it. While in the driveway, I hear from across the street, which is where a park is located, a girl who sounded to be somewhat young, maybe middle school age, say, "You promised me. You promised me." Assuming it was just some random kids at the park, I continued over to my truck. But just as I approached my door, the girl stepped out into the light on the sidewalk. There I could see a girl, maybe 5'6" in height with brown hair, but the shadow of the street blacked out her face completely. Holding in her hand was a leash with a white dog connected, husky looking. Once she stepped out, she immediately said, "Can you give me a ride?" Of course, this wouldn't set off any alarms in my head if it wasn't nearly 12:30 at night in a decently small neighbourhood. I explained, "No, I can't give you a ride," and I continued back to my door after getting my phone. As I walked, I kept an eye on the girl, curious to what she was doing and being cautious, of course. She watched and walked away from me as I approached my door. Once reaching my door, I stopped there for a quick second, and that's when she stated, in a completely creepy sounding way that I can't explain, "Please help me." It sounded almost monotone, with a childish tone, I should add. I immediately entered my home and locked the door. Shortly after, my girlfriend and I sat at the bedroom window, looking out to make sure she wasn't attempting to get in my truck or anything, and we only saw a coyote walk past the window, which, by the way, scared the shit out of me, but nothing of the girl. She was gone. This wouldn't stick out to me if it weren't for the time of night and a few other things. Who was the girl saying promised her? She was alone. If she had a phone, why not call someone for a ride instead of asking a complete stranger? And how did she get to the park with her dog in the first place? If she walked, she would have to have lived close, which means she didn't need a ride. And if she drove, she'd have her car. The whole situation felt off, left me feeling anxious and nervous of what could have happened. Was it a kidnap or murder trap? Was it spiritual? Was it a skinwalker? I lived next to a res. Not sure if a skinwalker can even talk. All I know is I won't be spending much time alone outside anymore at night. My Craigslist experience, posted by dependent ad 87493. Okay, I have all my doors and windows locked for an important reason I'll get into soon. Let me start off by telling a little about myself. I'm a guy, 27 years old. I live in Ohio. Okay, I'll get on with the story. I was looking for a shelf for my new book collection and Funko Pop collection. I was looking everywhere for it. Amazon, eBay, Best Buy. They're either sold out or overpriced. Craigslist was my last hope. After about an hour in my search, I found a perfect shelf that was surprisingly $15. No scratches, no accidents. This seemed like a steal for such a good looking shelf. I gave the dealer a call. Hello? He had an intimidating, raspy British voice. Hello, I'm the guy needing the shelf for $15. Is this the dealer? Why, of course, mate. My name is Eric. Nice to meet you, mate. Yeah, you too. So when can you come? I can come right now, if that's okay with you. Yeah, it's completely fine. Okay, thank you. No worries, mate. Then I hung up, I got my keys and headed in my car and drove to the address. When I arrived, it was nothing but a hatch. The fuck? I said to myself. I opened the hatch and headed down the stairs. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, there was a light switch, which someone had turned on. Hey, are you Eric? No, I'm Lance. Eric's in here, walking around, waiting for you. Okay. Can you come with me? Sure. He sounded flattered, and I noticed he started to blush. Anyways, we opened the door. What the fuck? This place is fucking huge. It looked like a huge warehouse. This is the shit Eric keeps with him. He stores a lot of shit in here, and strangely, there's wires hanging around. You'll find them eventually. Okay. We started to look for Eric. We shouted out his name, and eventually I found the wires Lance was talking about. Then we approached the shelf, just like Eric stated it. No scratches, no accidents. This is the shelf. Oh, cool. What are you going to use it for? To store my books and Funko Pops. Okay, I'll help you carry it, and I'll set your money on that recliner. I placed the money on the red recliner and started to help Lance carry the shelf to my car. Looks like you found the shelf, someone in a British, intimidating, raspy voice said. Yeah. You must be Eric, huh? I wasn't looking behind me as I spoke. Who said I was Eric? Then, what's your real name? Turn around, you imbecile. I slowly turned around and I saw a humanoid wire monster with some fox girl mask. Lance turned around and turned white. The name's Enard Leroux. I'm the one who took control of that cabin that you recognize. I'm the one who looks like Leroux. That stupid slut doesn't even know who I am now. Haha. You're next, punk. We have to run, Lance screamed. We started to run, and Enard Leroux was on my tail. Thank God me and Lance found the exit. We hurried in my car and floored the fuck out of there. Okay, this has been terrifying to me and Lance. But to you fuckers out there, You probably think I have a phobia of women. I don't, even though I'm gay. I don't hate women. So let me warn you, if you see a fucking hatch in the middle of the woods, don't, and I mean don't, approach it. Jared's writings. I have no idea where to start. I don't even know what I'm writing. Maybe I'm just writing for the sake of writing. After all, writing has always kept me calm, and in a situation like this, I need to remain calm. The storm isn't helping to keep me calm. It's only getting worse and worse. My name is Jared Conrad. I'm 28 years old. My address is 13 Toronto Street, Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. I am 5'8". I have a medium brown hair, blue eyes, and a small scar on my right cheek. I am wearing a South Park t-shirt, blue jeans, and black Nike runners. I think I entered this place on the 1st of the 12th, 2018, and I am currently in room 312 of the Great Northern Hotel. That's really the best I can do with location, but I will explain all that in a minute. I don't know if I should write this down, but something in my head is telling me to. I don't know how I found myself in this hellhole, and I don't know if I will ever be coming out of here. The music hasn't played in a while, but that's something I'll also write about in a minute. I should first write about how I found myself here, but it's way harder than it sounds. I was on my bed and I just felt like my entire body jolted, and before I knew what happened, I was in the hotel lying on a bed. The room was like it was from the 20th century. I thought I was lucid dreaming at first, so as you could imagine, I was quite excited, but the excitement quickly faded away. I think I had a panic attack, but it's been ages, and with the state of my head is in at the moment, I am not the best at remembering. I still just hope this is a dream, but I know it isn't. After I managed to calm myself down, I think I left the hotel through the lobby. Ignore the last part. I know for certain I got a drink at the hotel's bar. I don't remember what brand it was, but I think it was cider. After my drink, I left the hotel and I looked up over the main entrance to see the name of the hotel. It was called Hotel Holyrood. I stood my ground outside the hotel and looked around. The first thing that caught my eyes was the ocean, and with the ocean came the smell. I hate the smell of the sea. The sky was void of clouds, and the sun stood stationary in the middle of the sky. As I looked around at the buildings outside the hotel and read the various signs, it seems as if I was in a seaside amusement town. The various cars on the street told me what country I was in. The license plates were Irish. I thought I was in Ireland. Well, I know I'm not in Ireland. The cars in this town were all brands. I knew Toyota and all that stuff. I had three options. I could take the road to my left that led me to what seemed to be a suburban area, the road to my right that led deeper into this town, or the road in front of me that led me out to the coastal road, to what I know now as the memorial in the next town and the water park in the town I'm in now. I still don't know what stood in the first town in place of the memorial and water park in the others. I know what I'm saying is really weird about these different towns, but I will explain as all this soon enough. Please ignore any spelling mistakes. I'm shitting myself and my head is a mess. I already wrote that, didn't I? Looks like I'm repeating myself as well. I turned right and head deeper into this town. The format of each town is pretty much the same, even with all the big differences. The first town felt like your standard seaside town with its arcades and such. I think the name of the town is Bundoran. I saw this word on various buildings and signs. It's at this point I realised something that I should have realised the minute I left the hotel. This place was void of life. There were no humans and there were no animals. I think that the fact that there was no animals was the thing that put me off the most. Apart from the distant waves of the sea, my footsteps and my breathing, this place was void of sound. There were various cars parked here and there, and the buildings looked as if they were opened for business, and every living thing just vanished. When I reached the very edge of the town, I found myself at what seemed to be a roundabout, except the two other roads that should have been there were not there. There were meant to be two other roads, because there were signs pointing to my right and in front of me. It was basically a cul-de-sac. They had English names on top and Irish names on the bottom. I forget the names of these towns, and even then, it isn't relevant. In front of me and to my right was a rolling plain, kind of what you would see at a golf course, and to my left was the sea, a few hundred meters in the distance. As I stood at the edge of the roundabouts, that's when I first heard that damned song. It came from all directions, and it felt like it was playing in the distance. As you can imagine, I was shocked and scared. The song kind of sounded like lo-fi or something along those lines. It has the words, "We didn't make it out," and I was all over her in it. It always played for the same amount of time, 30 seconds or so. I only wished that I didn't take my damned watch off before I came here. After the song ended and I got my wits back together, I saw it in the distance, another town, on the sea across the plains. I thought it looked similar to the town before because it was the same town. I just didn't know it yet. The fucking song played again. This time it came from outside the fucking window. It always comes from every direction, but this time it played a little longer. I couldn't make out the new words because of the storm, but I know there were more words. I'm scared, but I know what I must do. I must keep writing. It's the only thing I can do. Fuck that song. It took me a few minutes, but when I made it to the other town, I felt as if I had made a mistake. It was dilapidated. Every house on the edge of this town was boarded up, or there was no longer a house where a house should have been. I walked further into the town, and I don't know why I did it. It wasn't like there was anything dangerous about the town, looking back on it, but with how dilapidated it looked dangerous. As I walked further into this town, I saw a hotel to the right of me. Its doors were wide open, and Mother Nature had definitely had her way with it. Above the front entrance, there were 2 letters, H and R. There was definitely meant to be more letters there, and I think that's when it hit me. This was the exact town, just a lot more derelict. That was the same hotel I woke up in. I think I was quite shocked, but I can't remember. The town looked the exact same in layout and buildings, and I can't emphasize enough. That time I went down the road to the sea. The road curved to the right to reconnect to the main road, and when I was on this road I could see the old town. I was just past the horizon. As mentioned before, there was a memorial on this road. The memorial was a black square rock around 2 meters high with various names on the bottom. In the middle of the rock was what seemed to be writing in Irish on the left and English on the right. The flag flew on the top of the rock, but I will talk about that in a minute. I went over to it and I still remember, through my foggy-headed state, what the English read. This memorial commemorates the brave Irish men and Irish women who gave their lives on the 12th 5th 1941, defending their home of Bundoran from their traitors who dared go against the teachings of our leader, Owen O'Duffy. May their deeds not go in vain. The memorial was just as derelict as the buildings surrounding it. I was close enough to see what was on the flag now. The flag had a red satire on a blue field. If I'm not mistaken, at this time I heard the music again. I'm not sure. From this road that ran along the sea, I could see the old town. They even seemed to have the near exact same coastline, but it was hard to make out the other town's coastline. As I walked along this road to get back on the main road, there were various buildings to my right, near destroyed, but there was something I noticed on the road, and the sidewalks were torn up flags, the same flag that was on the memorial. I don't think I saw a single Irish tricolour. As I walked along the road, I reconnected to the main road, and from there I walked through this other town. More of these strange flags lay amongst the ruins. As I neared the edge of this town, I think the music played again, this time a tiny bit louder, but I don't know, maybe I was just mistaken. Once again, I stood at what seemed to be the exact same roadless roundabout, but this time I don't think there were any signs. From the edge of the roundabout, I saw it, the exact same town, but it looked like it was in a lot better shape from that distance, and lo and behold, I was right. After a few minutes of walking, I reached the new town. The town where I am now. It was the exact same as the first town, with the odd difference here and there. Primarily, I don't think I saw any signs in Irish. They were all in English. In this town, I think a wave of truth hit me about my situation. First off, I must have been here for an hour or two now, and for some reason I wasn't hungry, thirsty or tired. I did have a drink in the first hotel, but that was just to calm my nerves, and I hadn't even sat down after having that drink. I had been walking for what must have been an hour or two at this point. It fucking played again. Fuck this place. It was even louder this time, and it had a direction, just like last time. It came from outside the damn door I don't know what is playing it, but whatever the hell it was, it just came and went. It played for around 5 seconds this time. My ears are nearly fucking ringing. That storm is just getting worse as well. So I can't even leave, and even if I could, I'm on the 3rd floor, and I'm not going out through that damned fucking door. I'm going to stop writing for a while. I don't know if I'll start writing again, but I'm going to barricade the door with the chairs, nightstand, and the other things in this room. It's been a few minutes since I barricaded the door. I've heard no other noises apart from the rain and wind. I'm currently writing this in the bathroom. I closed the curtains and put 2 nightstands, 2 chairs, the bed, and all the furniture in the room. I don't know why I didn't just close the curtains. When I heard it coming from outside the window, but even then, it isn't like they will protect me. All I can do now is write, and that's just what I'm going to do. I took the road that ran along the sea in this town, just like what I did in the last town, where the memorial stood, was what seemed to be a water park. It seemed to be in a fairly okay condition, but nature and time definitely had been trying to reclaim it, if I'm not mistaken. Next to the water park seemed to be the small fairground, bumper cars, mini golf and stuff like that. The buildings were across from the monument in the first town were in much better condition in this town, but I think they still looked a little worn down. I think that's when I felt it. A few drops of rain fell on me. I looked up in the direction that would presumably lead me to another town. The sky was full of pitch black clouds. I still remember them clearly. The clouds were moving, and they were moving fast, and with the clouds, another truth dawned on me. I don't think the sun had moved at all in the few hours I had been here. It had stayed stationary in the middle of the sky. The rain continued to fall as I reached the end of the sea road. I think at this point I thought to myself, I had to find shelter. It was as if this place was answering my query. The coastline in this town was different. A large headland protruded into the sea, and on top of this headland was the hotel I am in now, the Great Northern. A road led up to this hotel, and I began to make my way up to it. I think I was halfway up the road when the fucking music started again. I began to run. I was terrified. It came from all around, and it was the loudest I had ever heard it before up to that point. I think it played for around 10 or 15 seconds, but the volume was nothing compared to what happened a few minutes ago. In case you were wondering, the ringing in my ears has stopped. As I made my way through the large doors of the hotel, it was if the storm suddenly became a hurricane the minute I closed the doors. I don't know what's real anymore. I'm still hoping this is just a dream, but I know it isn't. I've never tried drugs before, but I'm hoping something I ate before I came here had something in it or something like that. I did eat a dodgy restaurant in town before I entered this place. I don't know if I mentioned that. The hotel lobby was large and felt a lot more upscale compared to the other one. To my right was the dining room, and to the left was the check-in desk and some couches, and straight ahead was a hallway with a staircase at the end. I went behind the desk and rooted around a little. There I found this old, beat-up copybook and this pen. After that, I went down the hallway, and to my left, after a few seconds, was a bar. I poured myself a few drinks, and I think I may have gotten a little tipsy. I got a bag that was behind the bar and put a bunch of drinks in there. I put a few sodas in as well. I recognised most of the brands, but a few of them I've never heard of. As I put the bottles in, I think that's when I realised that all of them had the exact same expiration date. 3/12/2018. I made my way down the hall, and after about a minute of walking, at the end of the hallway was the staircase. I walked up the staircase, and there seemed to be 3 floors, including the ground. I decided to find a room on the 3rd floor, and here I am. It's been a few minutes since that fucking song played again. The lights have been flickering for the past few minutes now. They flicker for about a second and then go back to normal. The storm just seems to be getting worse. I'm scared. I don't know what to do, and I think I'm beginning to feel a little hungry and tired now. I don't know why I didn't bring any food. I guess I just couldn't think about it with the way I was. I'm tired. I'm tired of being scared, and I'm tired of writing. I'm going to try and sleep. If you're reading this, I don't know what to tell you. This place is alive, and it's playing with me. I'm going to climb into the bathtub, and I'm going to sleep. I don't care what happens next. The red and green eyes are always staring. At the time, I was still in the 1st grade when I moved out of our old house. Before we moved, I was living in Reading, and my grandfather had a jewellery store at the time, just down the street from the house. At that time, I used to walk to school every day, just up on the hillside. School for me was a long and boring place that I had to attend regularly. My teacher was not one of my favourite people. Luckily for me, that was a short-lived experience. I was glad to be out of that school for good, seeing as how Reading High is more like a babysitting service than a school. We moved out and found a new home on the outskirts of Reading in a small development. The development was said to have been built on swamp land, seeing as how the water was laying into the ground and the roads flooded after it was done raining. Seeing as I was living there for the years leading up to my graduation, Temple was now my new home. After we have settled into our new house, I began to see things that I've never seen before in my room. For 12 years, I have left my closet door closed at night because I have seen something that to this day still unnerves me. 2 eyes, at least, I believed were staring at me. I have tried everything that I could think of to debunk this as to what it could be. I had a very thick blanket that is black with a white Raiders logo and with white writing. I decided to use it as a curtain seeing as how I did not like the amount of light that was piercing through my window at night, but to no avail. The two eyes did not disappear, always staring, always looking at me, a red and green eye, never moving, evenly spread apart. I never found out what it could be. I was thinking that it could be a toy or something that would glow in the dark, but that was not the case, seeing as how batteries die. And I've seen the two eyes staring at me for 12 years. Every night I closed my closet door and I did not see the two eyes staring at me through the wood of the door. I felt some relief when I closed the door, knowing all too well that it was waiting there for me to open the door. Then one day I had a friend come over and sit in the closet space. He said to me that he felt a presence in the closet. I don't know if I am inclined to believe him, but I can only tell you what he said. He told me there was something in the closet that made him sick to his stomach, and that he felt uneasy sitting there. He left to go home that day with no other incident, and all was quiet that night. Only the eyes are staring at me, never wavering or changing, just staring all night. I was getting annoyed by this and was about to paint the back wall of the closet, but I was thinking, what if this did not work? And I was thinking that it could be a real mess, seeing as how I have a large wooden toy box in the closet full of stuffed animals. I decided not to do so after all. A few years had passed with nothing else but those glowing red and green eyes staring at me. My grandfather from my mother's side of the family died at around the same time my great-grandmother died from my father's side of the family. At the time we had to move a business and 2 residents, seeing as how we had a lot on our to-do list at the time of moving everything from 2 locations. I did not pay much attention to my closet. When we finally got everything out of the closet, I noticed that the 2 glowing eyes were still staring at me, never changing, never faltering, just staring. Once we finally made the move complete, I have not seen those eyes since then. I still wonder to this day if they are still there, looking out of the closet, staring. The cult. So my roommate, let's call him Sean, left school before the semester ended, and I thought this was rather strange. So I rummaged through some of his stuff and found a notebook. What I read was shocking. Here's what the notebook read. I replaced names for privacy reasons. Well, I've never really written a diary or anything before, so I don't really know what I'm doing, but here goes nothing. Night 1. The concert was good, I guess. I'm not really into screamo that much, but Jack was good on guitar. So my girlfriend Rachel and I were taking everybody home. We came close to Rick's house and we saw a bright orange light up the night sky and smoke rising into the heavens. It was extremely large amounts of light and smoke, so naturally we went to check it out. We thought a house was on fire. That's how large it was. It was strange because there was no road that led directly to where the fire was, so we parked the truck on the closest street and proceeded on foot. As we got closer to the fire, we started to hear chanting. We couldn't tell what the chanting was saying, but it was deep and loud. I'm not sure why I got as close as I did, maybe to impress Rachel. But the point is, I got close, too close. Every person chanting was surrounding the fire in a large circle, and they all appeared to be wearing the same robes, like a monk's. Anyway, I was at least less than 100 feet away from them. I held my phone up so that I could take a picture, but before I could get the photo, one of the men saw me, and in an instant all of them were glaring at me, their hoods darkening their faces. Instinctively I took off running and ran back to the truck and yelled, "Drive!" Immediately Rachel floored it and we took off. They asked me what happened and I told them that I thought they saw me. It was quite a scare, but I wasn't too worried. It's not like they knew where I lived. I went home that night, and at about 1 in the morning I decided to hit the hay. This is when it began. I had a terrible nightmare. It wasn't anything gruesome or disgusting. It was just shocking. All it was just someone in a cloak, like the ones I saw one of the people by the fire. What I saw was this man in the cloak. All he did was stand there and stare. I couldn't make out any features of his face, just his eyes. They were pitch black, piercing, like they were staring straight into my soul. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Night 2. I had the same dream as last night. It was longer this time. I felt like I wanted to wake up, but couldn't. It was like the man had trapped me. Night 3. I don't want to sleep tonight. Can't stand to have that dream again. I've been looking over my shoulder all day. I'll just drink some Red Bull and watch a marathon of Top Gear. Day 4. I might be going crazy, or maybe it's the lack of sleep, but I could have sworn I saw the cloaked man outside my chemistry window. Night 4. I tried to stay awake again tonight, but I just couldn't. The lack of sleep got to me and I passed out. The dream was worse than ever. Same dream, same cloaked man. Just this time there was a high-pitched squeak going on the whole time, and every once in a while a deep laugh would arise, then fall as quickly as it had come. I can't take much more of this, and Luke is no help since he's home for the long weekend. Night 5. I decided to have Rachel stay with me tonight. I don't want to face this alone. Once again, same dream, same man, same high-pitched squeak. Except this time the laugh was louder and more frequent. I feel like this is from Freddy Krueger shit. Day 6. I saw him again. He was in the motherfucking reflection of my bathroom mirror. I looked behind me and he wasn't there. God, I don't know how much of this I can take. Night 6. Luke's back and I told him what had been happening, and he told me to just relax, that I'm overreacting. He's probably right, but why can't I shake this nightmare? Day 7. I saw him again today. He was across the street from me, just glaring. I know he was there because I stared back at him for a good 20 seconds. I think they are after me. They're gonna kill me. Night 7. I actually didn't have the dream tonight. It was worse. I awoke with a jolt in the middle of the night. I can't remember why, but what I saw nearly gave me a heart attack. I glanced at the window, and there, standing in the window, was the fucking cloaked man. I looked away in fright, and when I looked back, he was gone. I have to get out of here. I'm going home. Can't stay here anymore. Day 8. I packed the majority of my things. I'll leave the dresser here for Luke. Give him more space. I hope that maybe this trip back home will fix me. I think I just need to get away. The night. Luke invited me to a party tonight, but I told him I was too tired and I was going to get some sleep. I wish I went to that party. Luke stayed out all night, so it was another night alone. The dream came back and it was just as bad as before. Like last night, I woke up in the middle of the night and looked out the window. Thankfully, there was nobody there. I jolted in fright when there was hard, frequent and frantic knocking on my door. I looked through the peer hole and I saw Rachel knocking and banging, screaming for me to help. I opened the door and he was fucking standing there. I was paralysed with fright. Sorry if this seems really descriptive, but I will never forget that image in my head. He glared at me with his dark, piercing eyes for what seemed like an eternity. Then, in an instant, he released a horrible, blood-curdling scream and lunged at me. Then I blacked out. I woke up on the floor of my dorm room with the door wide open and a crowd gathered around me. And go fucking figure, there he was, in the back of the crowd, glaring at me. Fuck this. I'm grabbing my things and I'm leaving for home. Fuck this. I just can't take it anymore. That is the end of the notebook. This is Luke speaking again, and after I read this over a couple of times, I decided to do some research on this cult. I found nothing, but what I can tell you, what has happened since the incident, and what I've determined. Well, Rachel went back home as well. I guess she's not with Sean anymore, but there is a good reason for that. Sean never made it back home. For some god-forsaken reason, he jumped in front of a moving train and killed himself the night he was supposed to get back home. I think his plan of escaping the cloaked man didn't work, and he just couldn't take it anymore. Here's what I've determined on the whole situation. There was no cult. I talked to Rachel and the others about the fire, and they said that it wasn't chanting that they heard, it was singing. And they also said that they didn't get close enough to tell, but they said they couldn't see anyone around the fire. So I think that they were all figments of Sean's imagination. Maybe something happened to him in his childhood that sparked his mind to think up this disturbing cult. I'm not the best at research, so maybe I missed some key information about this cult. Any info you might have on this cult would be greatly appreciated. And on a side note, I'm pretty sure I saw the cloaked man in the hallway while I was getting a drink. Maybe Sean's notebook is getting to me. Casual noises. Have you ever stayed up too late trying to get to sleep, tossing and turning to find a comfortable position to rest in, but you can't, whatever reason it may be? Legs are getting too warm, pillow is getting too warm, not enough blanket on one part, etc. Alone in the darkness of your own room at night. Now, here, this is your own little sanctuary. In the day, you know where everything is, everything from your collection of video games and movies to your laptop riddled with more videos and images of the latest Girls Gone Wild parties. It's an entirely different room when no light can or will enter. What I'm trying to get at are those quick and sudden pops and cracks you hear when the room gets too quiet. Ever hear those? Of course you have. They could be frequent pop, pop, snap, pop, or they could be dormant for most of the night, maybe a single snap. Most of us would simply brush it off because it's such a frequent phenomenon. It happens so often, so why should you care? Most of us probably find some way to explain it, to comfort ourselves. Well, the heater is on, and it flows through the vents, and metal expands when it is heated, so that's what those pops are. It's such a small, casual thing, a casual noise no one thinks of it all that much, no one bothers to pursue it all that much, such a little noise with such little value. Let's face it though, regardless of how you think of it, you follow them. Every little pop seems to be coming from another spot in your room. Your room. You follow not with your eyes, but with your head. Pop, turn left. Pop, slightly right. Pop, straight up. You can follow with your head, but can you follow the noise to find out where its source is? Wouldn't it be the strangest thing if these pops weren't coming from the vent, if they had another source? But What could they be? Here's an odd question. What kind of flooring do you have? Hardwood? Carpet? Walk on the flooring and you get a noise. Hardwood will creak loudly, while carpet will creak a bit fainter. Take this into consideration when you hear those noises while you sleep. It may not be a heater like you think it is. There is little to no distinction between making the floor react to footsteps and the pops and snaps you hear at night in your room. Cabin from Hell. Let me tell you a story. There is a small town on the outskirts of a slightly larger town. The people there call it a city. This is where I live. I live in a big house with a lot of land, though my favourite place to go has always been the forest. I love the big trees and the dense bushes and the howl of the animals at night. In a small clearing in the midst of the woods and bordered by a field stands a lone cabin. This was my clubhouse, my base of operations, my castle, my home away from home. I loved it. I decorated it and called it my own. My favourite times were when I could spend the night out there, my friends and I telling ghost stories and squealing late into the night. I didn't always stay out with a friend though. The woods were my home. I loved them. I was never afraid. I would pack up my sleeping bag and march proudly down the trail with my little lantern until I came upon my cabin. I would unlock the door with my special skeleton key and set up my bag on the cot my mum had given me. I did this one night, one clear summer's night. I settled in, per usual, and listened to the sounds of nature, the chirps of crickets, the hoo-hoos of owls, my lullaby soothing me to sleep. I don't know when exactly it changed. I only know it was dark. The once abundant noise of the nocturnal forest faded, and the silence was so loud it jolted me awake. The forest only goes quiet for one of two things: a storm or a predator. I glanced up at the window in the wall above my head and saw at once there was no storm. The moon and the stars shone down on me like a million diamonds, illuminating the black velvet of the night sky above the clearing. I figured there must be a predator, some wolf or cougar on the prowl. The window was locked and the door barred. No matter what creature may be out there, I was safe. I snuggled back in and rolled to face the room. Back against the wall, I began to drift back to sleep, reassured by my logic and the security of my little abode. A soft grunt came next to my ear, clearly heard through the paper-thin wooden walls of my cabin. My eyes shot open and I laid perfectly still as a subtle sniffing followed the grunt. I squeezed my eyes shut and held my breath, hoping the creature would go away before making an attempt to break into my cabin. I smelled like prey and was on ground level. Of course it would attempt to pursue me. I only hoped it wouldn't hurt itself trying to break through the walls. My hope was misplaced though. The sniffing stopped. I waited a few moments and sighed. It had left, but something else was wrong. The light. The moon had cast a light through the small window above me, but that light was gone. Not completely though. There was enough left to show the silhouette of a head and shoulders blocking the window. I rolled onto my back as quietly as I could and looked up. There was indeed something in the window, something for which I have no words. I stopped moving, paralysed, mouth open in a mock scream. When it turned, it cast its head downwards, and its eyes, those awful, soulless red eyes, looked into mine, peering into the depths of my soul. That is when I screamed, loud and shrill, a cry for life, mercy, help, and that is when it moved faster than I can follow. The cabin, my safe haven, crashed in on me. The world went black. Now, let me tell you another story. This is a small town on the outskirts of a slightly larger town. The people there call it a city. This is where I lived. I lived in a big house with a lot of land, though my favourite place to go has always been the forest. I love the big trees and dense bushes and the howl of the animals at night. The big house no longer exists, replaced by a worn out shell comprised of a few sorry crumbling walls. The woods are still there though, and the field too, though now overgrown and unkempt. In a small clearing in the midst of these woods stands a lone cabin. Many stories are told about this cabin and about the things that happened there all those years ago. What exactly happened though, nobody knows for sure. Some say it was a madman escaped from a nearby prison. Others say it was a case of child abuse. Others still say it was an accident or an attack from a rabid animal. These are among the prominent logical theories. Hidden among these, though mostly popular with the kids, and other theories, supernatural theories. These theories range from a demon to a werewolf, but the major theme is curiosity. All their lives, children are told to stay out of those overgrown woods, but children never do as they are told. They are told there is no cabin there, that the tales of the supernatural are wives' tales. The children have a different idea though. The cabin, they say, still stands, and whatever was there that night still lurks inside that wooden house from hell. This scares the children for a while, but as they grow older and more adventurous, they begin to question it. Then the dares start. I dare you to spend a night in hell's cabin, and they do. Curious youngsters come every so often. I see them, their nervous faces flushed from the efforts of the trek through weeds and ivy, the looks of surprise and suppressed fear on their faces when they see the cabin is there, looming in the middle of the clearing. They usually come in groups, fear suppressing the desire to come alone. These groups stay scared through the night, then they leave. I watch, sad that they have come and gone, but some come alone. It is for these brave souls that I wait. I watch as the sun goes down and the crickets chirp, their noise lulling the child to sleep. I watch as the moon rises and the stars twinkle, and I leave my hiding spot. The forest goes quiet and I watch as this silence disturbs the child. I watch through the window, my silhouette cast down onto the floor. I see the child freeze, fighting the urge to look out the small window. Sometimes I have to knock, but they always give in to their curiosity. Eventually, with a turn of their head and mine, I meet their eyes, the look of confusion, then fear, as my deep red eyes penetrate deep into their soul, seeing their past, present, and reading their future. I grin, showing my pointed yellow teeth. They open their mouths and scream. The cabin crashes and the world goes black. I slip away as the sun peeks over the horizon, and I watch as yet another victim is found in the cabin from hell. And that's it for tonight, my little hellhounds. Thanks for listening. If you have any scary stories, then submit them to Reddit r/homeofscares and follow me on Twitter at homeofscares. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe, and click the bell icon so you get notified every time I upload, so you don't miss another scary episode. Now, good night, my little hellhounds.